Eli had never expected that his life on the station would come to this moment. Weeks of subtle observation, tense exercises, and quiet fascination had led him to a day that would test not just his skills, but his courage, his creativity, and his ability to think under pressure. A rogue fleet had been detected approaching the sector. Unlike the previous minor incidents, this was serious. The fleet was large, heavily armed, and moving with precision. The station's alarms blared as officers scrambled to their posts. Eli felt the familiar tightness in his chest, but he also felt something new, a strange confidence that came from knowing he had learned from one of the most capable beings in the galaxy. Kira arrived in the command center moments later. Her presence was calm, commanding, and immediate. Eli could feel the weight of her gaze as she surveyed the incoming threat. "You are prepared, human," she said quietly. Eli nodded, taking a deep breath. "I will do my best, General." The battle began. Sensors flashed with the positions of the incoming ships. Communications channels buzzed with reports from human and Zyra units alike. Eli coordinated the response, calling on tactics he had studied, strategies he had improvised, and instincts he had developed over weeks under Kira's watchful eye. "Adjust the interceptor paths to account for unpredictable movement," he called out. "Diversion units, hold positions until I give the signal. Human and Zyra teams must synchronize perfectly. Timing is everything." Kira observed silently, her eyes locked on him. Occasionally, she offered a brief nod, a subtle gesture that both reassured and challenged him. Eli felt the pressure of her attention, but instead of fear, he found focus. He thought quickly, issuing commands that allowed the station's defenses to adapt to the rogue fleet's unpredictable patterns. Minutes stretched like hours. The enemy ships maneuvered cleverly, testing their defenses, but Eli anticipated their moves, drawing on strategies he had improvised with Kira in mind. Every adjustment, every decision was critical. The fate of the station and the lives aboard it rested in his hands. Kira spoke at one point, her voice calm but firm. "Do not falter, human. Trust your judgment," Eli nodded, heart racing. "I won't, General." The battle reached a critical point. One of the rogue ships had slipped past the outer defenses, heading straight for the station's main supply hub. Eli analyzed the situation and realized that conventional methods would fail. He had to take a calculated risk. "Prepare an intercept pattern," he instructed, "but divert part of the fleet through an unexpected channel. I'll create a temporary shield with the station's auxiliary systems. Timing must be perfect." Kira's gaze held his. "Are you certain?" Eli swallowed hard. "It's our best option. We can't wait." The plan unfolded with precision. The fleet moved as Eli commanded, human and Zyra units coordinating seamlessly. The rogue ship entered the trap, and the temporary shield held just long enough to redirect it into a safe trajectory. The station remained intact, the supply hub unharmed. Kira allowed herself a small nod of approval. "Remarkable," she said quietly. "Your decisions saved countless lives." Eli felt a rush of relief, but also something else, a warmth that spread through him as he realized the depth of her respect. This was no longer observation or curiosity. Kira genuinely admired him, trusted him, and valued his judgment. As the immediate threat passed, Kira motioned for him to follow her to a quieter part of the station. They walked through dimly lit corridors, the hum of systems around them, until they reached the observation deck. The stars stretched infinitely beyond the glass, a reminder of the vastness of the universe. "You have proven yourself," Kira said softly, her gaze meeting his, not just in skill but in thought. "In courage, in adaptability, you are extraordinary, Eli." Eli's chest tightened. I just did what I thought was right," he said quietly. Kira stepped closer, her presence both commanding and strangely gentle. "What you thought was right is what makes you remarkable. You acted without hesitation, without fear of failure. That is rare, even among humans." Eli felt a strange warmth, a combination of pride and nervous excitement. He had never been seen this way before, not by anyone, not even by his own species. And here was Kira, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, recognizing him not just for what he could do, but for who he was. "Your perspective," she continued, "your unpredictability, your courage, it has changed the outcome today. Not just for the station, but for everyone aboard. You have proven that humans are capable of far more than we imagined." Eli swallowed hard, words catching in his throat. I didn't think I could do it alone. I learned from you, General. Watching you, observing, understanding. It helped me think differently. Kira's eyes softened, her usual intensity giving way to something warmer. Perhaps, she said quietly, that is the lesson. That collaboration between species can create solutions no one alone could achieve. And in that, humans are exceptional. Eli felt his heart race. She wasn't just praising him for skill. She was acknowledging the uniqueness of humans, the value of their courage, creativity, and perspective. And in that recognition, he felt a profound connection. They stood together in silence for a moment, gazing at the stars. The events of the day, the danger, the pressure, the adrenaline, all of it seemed to crystallize into a quiet understanding. They were no longer just officer and general. They were allies, collaborators, and perhaps in some unspoken way, companions. Kira spoke again, her voice softer now. You have earned my respect, Eli, my attention, and perhaps something more. Eli blinked, his heart pounding. Something more? Her gaze held his, unwavering. You have shown that humans are remarkable, that they can act with courage, think with clarity, and inspire those around them. That is rare. That is why you matter. Eli felt a warmth spread through him, a mixture of pride, nervous excitement, and something he couldn't quite name. He realized that his journey, from a nervous human officer in a room full of alien dignitaries to this moment, had transformed him. He had discovered not just his abilities, but also his worth, his courage, and the respect that could bridge species. He smiled nervously. I never imagined that I could make a difference like this. Kira's expression softened further. You have, and you will again. Humans have a unique strength. It is not in raw power, but in creativity, courage, and unpredictability. That is what makes you special. Eli felt a rush of emotion. For the first time in his life, he realized that being human, with all the flaws, awkwardness, and unpredictability that came with it, was enough. More than enough. Kira's presence, her attention, her recognition, it was overwhelming, but in the best way. He knew that the bond they shared, born from respect, collaboration, and fascination, would continue to grow. They had faced danger together, learned from each other, and discovered the value of human ingenuity. And in that realization, Eli felt a deep sense of purpose. He was not just a human officer. He was a bridge between species, a reminder that courage, creativity, and honesty could influence even the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Kira stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. Remember this, human, she said softly. You are exceptional. Never doubt that, and never forget. Humans are remarkable. Eli nodded, feeling a sense of pride and resolve he had never known. I won't, General. Thank you for everything. They stood together on the observation deck, looking out into the infinite stars. The danger had passed, but the lessons, the respect, and the connection they had forged remained. Eli understood now that the journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more decisions, and more opportunities to prove himself. But he also knew that he was ready, and that he was not alone. Kira's attention was no longer a source of anxiety. It was a sign of trust, recognition, and a bond that transcended species. Eli felt exhilarated, inspired, and deeply connected to the most formidable being he had ever encountered. For the first time, he truly believed in the strength and potential of humans, and in himself. And as the stars stretched endlessly before them, Eli realized that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary. Eli tried to convince himself that nothing had changed. The meeting was over. He had said his words, she had said hers, and life on the orbital station should have gone back to normal. Yet from the moment he left the chamber, he began noticing things that made him doubt his own logic. It started with the corridor. Eli walked to the mess hall for a quick meal, trying to focus on something simple, like the taste of his food or the latest station log updates. But as he entered the hall, his stomach flipped. There, sitting near the window that looked out into the endless stars, was General Kira. She wasn't doing anything particularly unusual, reading a data pad, fingers gliding across the controls, but the moment she looked up, her eyes found him. Eli froze. He wasn't sure what to do. He had been trained for countless emergency scenarios, for handling rogue systems, for dealing with alien negotiations, but he hadn't trained for this. He looked around. The mess hall was mostly empty and no one else seemed to notice. Just him caught in the quiet intensity of Kira's stare. He swallowed. Hello, General, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Kira's lips curved into the tiniest hint of a smile. She tilted her head, the same way she had done during the meeting. Human, she said softly. You seem surprised. Eli forced a nod, trying to act calm. I wasn't expecting to see you here. Her gaze didn't waver. It made him uncomfortable in a way that was strange. Part nervous, part fascinated. Perhaps you will grow accustomed to my presence, she said. There was no threat in her tone, only an almost playful patience. Eli sat down at a table far enough to feel safe, but close enough that he couldn't stop noticing her. Every bite of his food tasted bland. His mind kept replaying their first meeting. Did he really say something that mattered? Did she really find him interesting? By the next day, the situation had become impossible to ignore. Eli was in the communications hub, preparing reports and cross-checking transmission logs when he felt a presence behind him. He turned, expecting a colleague, but found Kira leaning lightly against the doorway. She didn't speak at first. Her eyes scanned him, taking in his posture, his movements, the way his fingers tapped nervously on the console. You are focused, she said finally. Human focus is remarkable, Eli flushed. He wasn't sure whether to thank her or be embarrassed. I try my best, he said, keeping his tone professional. There's a lot to do. Kira tilted her head again. You also seem aware of when I am observing you. Eli blinked. I guess? He stammered. He realized that he had noticed her staring before, but he had hoped he was imagining things. Now it seemed impossible to ignore. She seemed to appear everywhere he went. Over the next few days, it became a pattern. The station was large, but somehow Kira always found him. At the training simulators, she would appear silently, arms crossed, watching him complete exercises. In the corridors, he would glance around and see her presence in the distance, her posture calm but her eyes unwavering. Even in the mess hall, she would sometimes sit nearby, reading reports, occasionally glancing up to check on him. His human colleagues noticed and began teasing him quietly. Looks like someone has a fan club, one whispered during lunch. Eli shook his head, trying not to laugh. It's probably nothing. She's just observing me for work. But he couldn't convince himself. There was something different about her attention. It wasn't the way she watched other humans. Other officers she interacted with usually received sharp commands, strict corrections, or polite acknowledgement. Eli's interactions were personal, focused, curious. One afternoon, Eli was performing routine checks in the station's observation deck, reviewing sensor logs of nearby ships. He heard the quiet hum of the doors opening. Without looking up, he assumed it was one of his team members. You work quickly, Kira said from behind him. Eli jumped, almost dropping his datapad. General, I didn't hear you come in, she smiled faintly. You are always alert, human. I appreciate that. Eli's face turned red. Thank you, General. I try. Kira stepped closer, examining the displays. Your methods are unconventional, she said. Yet effective, Eli swallowed hard. Unconventional? He had been worried he was just clumsy. Yet she admired it. I just think differently sometimes, he admitted, his voice quiet. Her eyes flicked up to his. That is why you are interesting. The word hit him again. Interesting. Not competent, not capable, not human. Interesting. The implications were impossible to ignore. He stumbled over his words, feeling flustered. I don't know what to say. Kira's expression softened ever so slightly. You do not need to say anything, human. Your actions are enough. Over the next week, Eli's routine became chaotic. He would enter a room, only to notice her silhouette in the corner. He would check logs, only to see her examining the same panels he was studying. At first, he tried to avoid her gaze, but it was impossible. Every time he looked up, she was watching. Not in a threatening way, but in a way that made him acutely aware of himself, his behavior, and even his thoughts. He confided in one of his colleagues, Mara, during a late-night break. It's weird, he said quietly. She keeps watching me, everywhere I go. I don't understand it, Mara laughed softly. You're telling me you don't know why General Kira is interested in you? Come on, Eli, you made a good impression. She probably hasn't met a human like you before. You're different. Eli shook his head. Different? I'm just me. I didn't do anything special. I think, Mara smiled knowingly. Humans are special, Eli. Sometimes you don't even realize it. Maybe that's what she sees. Or maybe she's just curious. Either way, you need to figure out how to handle it. Eli wasn't sure how to handle it. Every glance from Kira made his stomach twist, his heart race, and his mind spin. He tried to focus on work, on reports, on training exercises, but her presence loomed constantly. One evening, the station's alarms rang suddenly. A nearby cargo freighter had strayed too close to an asteroid field. Eli rushed to his post, checking navigation charts and communication channels. Kira arrived moments later, her pace calm and deliberate. "You are efficient, human," she said. "I am impressed." Eli glanced at her, startled. "Thank you, General. I just try to do my job." Kira's eyes softened slightly as she observed him coordinate the response to the freighter. "Your mind works differently than ours. You see solutions where others see problems, that is, rare." Eli's cheeks flushed again. Rare. Interesting. Different. He didn't know whether to feel proud or terrified. The freighter situation resolved smoothly, thanks largely to Eli's quick thinking. Kira acknowledged him with a subtle nod before leaving the control room. But before she left, she glanced back, her gaze meeting his. It was a look that carried more weight than any words, and Eli felt a strange mixture of pride and nervousness. From that day on, it became clear. Kira's attention was not a passing observation. She was deliberately observing him, studying him, and perhaps even enjoying his presence. The thought made him nervous and excited at the same time. He tried to rationalize it. She was an alien general, powerful and commanding. He was just a human officer. Nothing could come of it. Yet he couldn't stop thinking about her gaze, her subtle words, the way she seemed genuinely interested in him. It was a strange feeling, something beyond fear or admiration. Something personal. And Eli realized with a mixture of excitement and anxiety that life on the station had changed completely. Every corner he turned, every console he checked, every moment of quiet, Kira could appear. And somehow, somewhere deep down, he wanted her to. It was only the beginning. Eli thought he had a handle on the situation, but he had been wrong. The realization came slowly, one quiet morning in the communications hub. He was reviewing incoming messages from distant sectors, ensuring the logs were correct, when he felt the unmistakable presence behind him. "Human," came Kira's voice, soft but commanding. Eli's head jerked up. "General, I didn't hear you come in." Kira smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made him forget how to breathe properly. She stepped closer, her presence filling the room with quiet authority. "You are focused," she said, glancing at the screens he was working on. "I wish to observe you more closely." Eli swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Yes, General," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Inside, his heart raced. Every word she spoke seemed to carry weight far beyond what he could understand. Kira leaned against a console, her arms crossed. "I have seen many humans," she continued. "Most are predictable. They follow routines. They speak carefully. They anticipate my expectations. You I do not," Eli flushed. I just try to do my best," he said. He wasn't sure if he sounded humble or awkward, but it didn't seem to matter. "You speak honestly," Kira said, her piercing gaze studying him. "Without overthinking, that is rare." Eli felt a strange mixture of pride and anxiety. Rare, interesting, unpredictable? The words from their first meeting came rushing back, and suddenly it made sense. She wasn't just watching him. She was fascinated. Thank you, General," he said, scratching the back of his neck. He hoped it sounded respectful and not foolish. I just do what seems right in the moment." Kira's lips curved into the slightest smile. "That is why you are different." "That is why I find you engaging." Eli froze. Engaging. It was one thing to be noticed for competence, but this felt personal. He didn't know how to react. He nodded awkwardly, hoping it didn't make him look ridiculous. Over the next few days, Kira began including him in activities he never expected. She invited him to the strategy room, where the Zira planned fleet movements, and asked him to assist in simulations. Eli was careful, aware that humans had never been trusted with such responsibilities, but Kira treated him not as a visitor but as a participant. "You humans think differently," Kira said during one simulation. You see options where we see only limitations, that is, valuable. Eli hesitated before answering. I guess we're used to improvising, he said quietly. We can adapt quickly. Sometimes it works. Sometimes, not so much. Kira tilted her head, observing him. Yet you attempt solutions without fear of judgment. That is rare, even for humans. The words made Eli's chest swell. Rare, interesting, engaging. He was used to being average, a small part of a huge human workforce. But here, under Kira's gaze, his mistakes were noticed, yes, but his creativity and courage were celebrated. It wasn't just professional. Kira seemed genuinely curious about his thoughts, his ideas, and his perspectives. She asked questions about human culture, humor, and improvisation. Sometimes her questions were serious, meant to gauge his strategic thinking. Other times they were light, almost teasing. You find humor in unusual places, she said one evening as they reviewed tactical data. I do not understand why it is entertaining. Eli laughed nervously. Humor is a way to deal with stress, to find light in difficult situations. Humans, we try to make each other feel better even in dangerous times. Kira regarded him silently for a long moment. Fascinating, she finally said. Even in peril you seek balance, that is, uncommon. Eli's mind raced. Uncommon, rare, fascinating. He had never felt so noticed, so seen. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. The dynamic between them grew more intense as days passed. Kira would appear wherever Eli was working, sometimes silently observing, sometimes offering brief guidance or subtle praise. He became acutely aware of his posture, his gestures, even the tone of his voice, because he knew she noticed everything. One afternoon, the station's alarms rang suddenly. Sensors had detected an unknown vessel approaching. Eli rushed to the control hub, analyzing the data and coordinating responses with the rest of the station's team. Kira arrived moments later, her movements calm and deliberate, her gaze sharp and focused. You are quick to respond, she said, watching his hands move across the controls. Efficient, resourceful. Eli felt his stomach tighten. Thank you, General. I just do my job. Kira's eyes softened slightly as she observed him coordinate. Your thinking differs from ours. That is useful. I approve. The incident passed without disaster, thanks largely to Eli's quick decision-making. As the immediate tension eased, Kira glanced at him, her gaze locking with his for a long, unspoken moment. Eli felt warmth spread through him, a mixture of pride, relief, and something unfamiliar. In the following days, their interactions became more personal. Kira began including him in discussions outside of strict protocol, asking his opinion on logistics, morale, and strategy. He realized that his perspective as a human was valued in ways he had never imagined. You have insight, Kira said one evening during a review session. Insight that my officers do not possess, that is why I seek your counsel. Eli blinked. Me? Insight? I'm just trying to help. Kira's lips curved slightly. Helping, yes. But more than that, you bring unpredictability, flexibility, courage. That is rare even in humans. Eli felt his face warm. Rare, interesting, engaging. He had heard the words so many times, but hearing them directly from her made them feel powerful, real. One day, Kira invited him to accompany her to the station's observation deck. The view of the stars stretched infinitely before them, and Eli felt small again, but in a different way. This time it wasn't fear. It was awe. You humans are remarkable, Kira said softly. Even the smallest actions can alter outcomes beyond expectation. Your perspective is valuable. Eli nodded, unsure how to respond. I try my best. I don't always succeed, but... He trailed off, unsure how to explain the strange sense of pride and nervous excitement he felt under her attention. Kira studied him for a long moment. Do you understand human? She asked finally. I do not admire easily. You have captured my interest, not just for your mind, but for your courage, your humor, your unpredictability. That is unusual. Eli swallowed hard, his heart pounding. Thank you, General. I don't know what to say. You need not say anything, Kira replied. Your presence is enough. The words left him speechless. Her gaze, calm and unwavering, made him aware of every twitch of his fingers, every movement, every thought. He realized that Kira's attention was not fleeting. She was deliberately watching, studying, perhaps even testing him, and somehow he found himself wanting her to. As the days went by, their connection deepened. Kira began to rely on his judgment in ways she had never allowed for any human. Eli's ideas influenced simulations, strategies, and even the planning of minor station operations. Other Zyra officers began to notice his impact, whispering quietly among themselves. "Human Eli," one officer remarked. "He is different. Kira values him." Eli, of course, was only half aware of this. He focused on doing his best, answering her questions and staying composed under her intense attention. But privately, he began to anticipate her presence. He found himself noticing when she would appear, adjusting his tone, posture, and words without even thinking. One evening, after another long day of simulations and reviews, Kira spoke to him in private. "You are brave," she said quietly, "not in the way humans often think. Not through combat alone, but in thought, in honesty, in courage to act without fear of judgment. That is rare." Eli's chest tightened. I'm just trying to help," he said softly. Kira's gaze held his. "You are more than that, human. You are remarkable." And in that moment, Eli realized something profound. He had always thought of himself as ordinary, a small part of a vast human effort in space. Yet here he was, recognized by one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, not just for what he could do, but for who he was. For the first time, Eli felt that being human and being himself was enough. More than enough, and Kira's fascination, her attention, her respect, it was real. It was a beginning that neither of them would forget. Life on the space station had changed completely for Eli. The once familiar routines now felt electric with anticipation. Every glance, every word, every subtle movement from General Kira carried weight beyond mere duty. She continued to observe him, but now she involved him in situations that were far more critical than simulations or casual exercises. It began with a series of strategic exercises meant to prepare the station for potential threats. The drills were intense, testing both human and Zyra officers' ability to respond under pressure. Eli had always excelled at thinking creatively, but this time, Kira made him a participant in a way no human had ever been. She assigned him responsibilities usually reserved for senior Zyra strategists. "You will coordinate the navigation response," Kira said, her eyes sharp and unwavering. "I wish to see how your mind operates under pressure." Eli's stomach tightened. "Understood, General," he replied, trying to steady his nerves. He glanced around at the Zyra officers nearby, all of whom were watching him closely. The atmosphere was tense but not threatening. Kira's attention alone made him aware of every choice he made, every decision he issued. The drill began. A simulated attack from an unknown fleet forced Eli to think quickly. Communications channels buzzed, sensors flashed with incoming data, and the Zyra officers awaited his orders. He hesitated briefly, then made a suggestion. A maneuver that relied on unpredictable timing and coordination between human and Zyra units. Kira's eyes narrowed as she observed him. "Interesting approach," she said softly. "Explain your reasoning," Eli swallowed. "If we anticipate their moves as they expect, we risk being trapped. By adjusting our formation unexpectedly, we create openings they may not see. It requires trust in our teams and quick adaptability, but it could prevent heavy losses." Kira tilted her head, studying him. "Clever, risky, but effective if executed correctly." She allowed a faint nod of approval. "Proceed." As the simulation unfolded, Eli's plan worked surprisingly well. The Zyra units adapted to his strategy, the human teams responded efficiently, and the simulated threat was neutralized with minimal losses. The officers around them whispered quietly, impressed. "You see?" Kira said afterwards, standing beside him. Her voice was calm, but her tone carried weight. "You are capable. Unpredictable yet precise. That combination is rare, even among humans." Eli felt a flush of pride but also unease. He had never been singled out like this before. Her praise was personal, and he realized that her interest in him went far beyond professional evaluation. He wasn't just a human officer. He was someone Kira genuinely noticed. The following days brought more challenges. Kira began involving him in planning for real station operations. Supplies needed rerouting due to a nearby asteroid belt. Minor security breaches required investigation, and coordination with other fleets demanded creative solutions. Each time, Kira observed him closely, offering subtle guidance and occasional hints but never interfering outright. "You humans," she said one evening during a coordination exercise, "you do not always follow the expected patterns. That is both frustrating and enlightening. You remind us that rigidity is not always strength." Eli smiled nervously. I guess we just try to adapt." Kira's eyes softened slightly, the intensity of her gaze becoming almost personal. "Adaptation is your greatest asset, and your courage. It inspires confidence." Eli's chest tightened. Her words, her attention, her presence, it was overwhelming and exhilarating all at once. He realized that he was no longer just performing tasks. He was part of a growing partnership. Kira was teaching him, yes, but she was also learning from him. The dynamic was unique, a blend of admiration, respect, and curiosity. Then came the day of the unexpected alert. Sensors detected a rogue vessel approaching the station at high speed. Unlike previous drills, this was real. Eli felt a surge of adrenaline. He was placed at the communications hub, coordinating human and Zyra teams to respond. Kira arrived moments later, her presence commanding yet calm, her eyes scanning the incoming data. "You are ready," she said simply, standing behind him. Eli swallowed. I will do my best, General." The situation escalated quickly. The rogue vessel maneuvered unpredictably, testing the station's defenses. Eli's heart raced as he issued orders, adjusted tactics, and anticipated the enemy's moves. He relied on creative thinking, improvisation, and quick judgment, skills that humans excelled at but Zyra often undervalued. Kira observed silently, her expression unreadable. Occasionally, she offered a brief nod, a subtle acknowledgement that Eli was making the right decisions. Her presence was steadying, almost comforting, yet it also intensified the pressure. He could not fail. Not with her watching. After tense minutes that felt like hours, Eli's strategies began to pay off. The rogue vessel was forced into a controlled retreat, and the station remained unharmed. Relief washed over him, but he remained aware of Kira's gaze. "You handled that well," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "Your ability to think quickly, to remain composed, it is admirable." Eli nodded, still catching his breath. "Thank you, General. I just did what seemed right in the moment." Kira's eyes softened, and for the first time she allowed a faint smile. "That is exactly why you are remarkable. The event changed everything." Other officers began to treat him differently, recognizing his unique abilities and the respect Kira held for him. Eli, however, found himself increasingly aware of her attention. Her eyes followed him. Her subtle gestures conveyed approval or curiosity, and he realized that he was thinking about her even when he was alone. One evening, Kira invited him to the observation deck. The stars stretched infinitely before them, the station silent except for the hum of its systems. Eli felt small again, but this time it was not fear, it was awe. "You have shown courage," Kira said softly, "not just in action, but in thought. You are more than I expected." Eli swallowed hard. I'm just doing what I can." Kira's gaze held his, unwavering. "You are remarkable, Eli. Your unpredictability, your creativity, your courage, it sets you apart." Eli's heart raced. He realized that their connection was deeper than he had understood. She valued him not only for his abilities but for who he was. The realization left him both exhilarated and nervous. Over the next few days, their bond grew stronger. Kira began involving him in decisions, asking his opinion on matters that no human had ever been consulted about. He felt respected, challenged, and seen in ways that were entirely new. One afternoon, she approached him during a routine systems check. "You think differently," she said quietly. "You see opportunities where others see obstacles. That is rare. That is valuable." Eli nodded, feeling a strange warmth. I just try to see what others might miss." Kira's eyes softened. "And that makes all the difference. I trust your judgment. That is unusual, even for humans." Eli felt a surge of pride and nervous excitement. The words, the attention, the recognition. It was overwhelming, but it also made him feel alive in a way he had never experienced. As days turned into weeks, Eli realized that life on the station had changed forever. Kira's fascination with him was not fleeting. It was deliberate, personal, and profound. He could not ignore it, and he found that he did not want to. He had become more than a human officer. He had become someone remarkable in the eyes of one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. And he knew deep down that their story was only beginning. Eli had never thought he would be nervous around aliens. He had seen pictures of the Zira before, studied them in training modules, and read about their strict customs and advanced military strategies. But nothing in the manuals could have prepared him for meeting General Kira in person. Standing in the massive meeting chamber of the orbital station, he felt small. Not physically small, he wasn't short, but small in the way that humans felt when facing something completely unfamiliar and magnificent. The chamber itself was enormous, almost cathedral-like. Its walls shimmered with light panels that displayed the stars outside. Aliens from various parts of the galaxy moved with grace and purpose. The Zira, in particular, were hard to miss. They were tall, humanoid but far more imposing than humans, with a regal air that made Eli feel clumsy and awkward simply by comparison. And at the head of the room, waiting for him with a calm but piercing gaze, was General Kira. Kira was nothing like Eli expected. Her height and posture made her look like she could command a fleet with a glance. Her scales, smooth and iridescent, reflected the soft light of the room. Her eyes were sharp, almost hypnotic, and she had a presence that could silence a room without effort. Eli had read that the Zira respected order, discipline, and honor above all, and that humor and lightheartedness were rare and sometimes considered frivolous. "Welcome, human," she said. Her voice was clear, melodic, but firm, carrying an authority that made Eli's stomach twist. Thank you, General Kira," Eli said, trying to keep his voice steady. He shook his hands as instructed in the cultural briefings, though he had no idea if the gesture meant the same thing to her species. Kira tilted her head slightly, studying him. Eli suddenly felt self-conscious. He cleared his throat. "It's an honor to meet you, humans. Appreciate your efforts to maintain peace in this sector." He tried to sound serious and professional, but somehow it came out more awkward than intended. Kira's gaze lingered. Eli shifted uncomfortably. He remembered something from the briefing. Zira value subtle communication. Words, tone, and posture all mattered. His tone might have been off. Had he accidentally insulted her? He swallowed hard and added, "We, look forward to, cooperation." That was the moment everything went wrong. Or perhaps right, depending on who you asked. In his nervous attempt to sound charming, he added a small, unintended smile. Just a tiny, harmless gesture. But for the Zira, it was a signal that humans rarely gave. One that could mean boldness, charm, even flirtation. Kira's eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle motion, but Eli felt it like a weight pressing down on him. There was a pause in the room, a stillness, as if everyone had noticed something Eli had not. He tried to focus on the other officers present, but they were all looking at him strangely, with a mix of surprise and quiet amusement. Eli blinked. Did I say something wrong?" he asked, trying to laugh it off. His voice was high-pitched, nervous, and a little too fast. Kira's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly, into what might have been a smile. Her gaze remained locked on him. "You have an interesting way of speaking, human," she said softly. Her words were measured, deliberate, but Eli felt a strange warmth in them, as if she were both amused and intrigued. Eli blinked again. "Interesting, that, sounds good, right?" He tried to match her calm tone, but ended up stumbling over his words. "I mean, I want to say, yes, I'm honored to be considered interesting." Kira's eyes widened fractionally, a movement that might have been imperceptible to anyone else. She leaned slightly forward, the slightest tilt of her head as if studying him more closely. Eli felt a sudden rush of heat rise to his face. He had been trained for diplomacy, for negotiation, for staying calm under pressure. But nothing had prepared him for being personally scrutinized by a being like Kira. Interesting. "Yes," she repeated slowly, as if savoring the word. "You humans are often predictable. Yet you find ways to surprise. You are unique." Eli's mind spun. Unique? Surprising? Was that a compliment or a warning? He wasn't sure what to do. He forced a smile, hoping it looked confident rather than stupid. I try my best, General. I think humans Have a lot of creativity. He waved his hands awkwardly, as if that somehow explained it. Kira's eyes did not leave him. She seemed amused now, a faint glimmer of something Eli couldn't name in her gaze. The other Zyra officers exchanged quiet whispers. Eli felt as though he were being examined under a microscope, one that could peer not just at his appearance but at his thoughts, his intentions, even the smallest twitch of his expression. "Your approach is unusual," Kira said finally. "Most humans would be cautious or restrained. You speak freely, even when it is unexpected." Eli nodded quickly, hoping he was saying the right thing. I guess that's one of our strengths?" He laughed nervously. "Or one of our problems. Sometimes I speak before I think." Kira's lips twitched upward, almost a smile. Her gaze softened slightly, but it was still intense. "Perhaps your unpredictability is why I find you intriguing." Eli froze. "Intriguing?" That word alone made his heart pound. He swallowed hard. Thank you, I think," he said, hoping he didn't sound like a fool. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Eli answered questions, tried not to stumble, and made notes with a shaking hand. Every time he glanced at Kira, she was staring at him again, watching him closely, almost like a predator observing prey, but without the threat. Instead, it felt attentive, focused, personal. Eli had never felt anything like it. By the time the meeting ended, Eli was exhausted. His colleagues walked him toward the exit, whispering softly behind their hands. "The general likes you," one said quietly. Eli blinked, horrified. "Likes me? No, she's just analyzing me, right? Professional interest only." But Eli couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in that room. Kira's gaze, the way she had studied him, the subtle movements of her body, it all left him unsettled. He felt like a tiny human standing in front of a galaxy-class storm, unsure if he had survived, impressed, or something else entirely. When he finally reached the station's corridor, he paused and looked back. The chamber doors were closing and Kira was still visible through the glass. She was watching him. Not the way a commander watched a soldier, not the way an alien studied a human for information, but in a way that made his chest tighten. Curious, interested, somehow. Approving, Eli shook his head. No, it must be his imagination. The human brain likes to misinterpret signals. He shook out his arms, trying to calm the sudden flutter in his stomach. He needed to focus on his work, on the reports, on maintaining professionalism. Nothing more. Yet as he walked away, he felt the weight of her gaze linger. For some reason, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Couldn't stop replaying the conversation in his mind. Every awkward word, every nervous smile, every accidental gesture, it all felt like it had mattered far more than it should have. And somewhere deep down, he realized that this was just the beginning. Eli had no idea that, by a single awkward statement and a nervous smile, he had done what no other human had managed. He had caught the attention of General Kira, and she did not forget easily. From that moment on, Eli's life aboard the station would never be the same.